Okay, so now it's time to work on our last a page of notes that we haven't gotten to, and that's going to be page 4, Employing Uniform Language and Reformatting. So employing uniform language is content principle 3 from the self-talk module, and of course there's a number of formatting principles that should be applied as well. We're going to work on both at the same time, and I recommend that you wait till, I don't want to see you employing uniform language within the paragraph. I want to see you do it in the reformatted. Notice that I'm not saying rewriting, because technically we're not rewriting anything. Sometimes students will do things like rephrase or paraphrase a sentence. Do not do that. Also, big warning that you should write down next to conditional statements somewhere. Never ever destroy a conditional statement by crossing out half of it or taking out the if then in any way. So sometimes, for example, I'll have like, if you get smart, then your brain will grow. And what some people will do with a conditional statement is say something like, your brain grows, sorry, I already forgot my example. If you get smart, then your brain will grow. Okay, so yeah. So then some people will take my conditional statement or a conditional statement and they'll turn it into what's called a categorical statement. And they'll say, your brain grows whenever you get smart. That might be logically equivalent, but you still could. What you're doing is you're destroying the hypothetical nature of what was a conditional statement. So don't do that. If something's an if-then statement, leave it as is. All right. Oh, you know what? I'm very intense right now, but that's just because I don't want you guys to make that mistake. I'm sorry. I wish I could stay calm and gentle in my voice, but I get too passionate. All right. Because I just don't want you guys to make these mistakes. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to apply it first, talking along the way, and then we'll do notes. So just kind of observe what I'm doing, and we'll go from there. All right, so when we're reformatting an argument, we only want to work with what has been left in statements that are numbered and labeled, and we want to work with things that do not have a line through them. And what I'm realizing right now with argument 1 is that I forgot to cross out something. This is a statement without a label. Why? Because, and I forgot to note this is the conclusion. We should have done this. Oh, we do have it over here. This is the conclusion repeated. So when you're reformatting the argument, you're not going to include a repeated conclusion. Notice that this version is a lot more fuzzy compared to the original wording of the conclusion, the same statement, expressing the same idea. In fact, this is very general. We don't know what this says unless we know what statement 1 says. So since this is a repeated conclusion, we'll cross it out. And that's what we would do if we had a repeated premise. We would also cross it out. Hence, we need to add, okay? So, all right. Oh, yeah, so page 3, actually see page 1 for note about eliminating if, and, or, then from a conditional statement. That all goes right there. Also, draw a line through repeated conclusions, statements. The fuzzier, less precise version. And then you can always pause this video to catch up. Which actually reminds me that when it comes to labeling, I said this is page 1, use C repeated when a conclusion is repeated. So I should also have said use P repeated when a premise is repeated. Okay, it's kind of self-explanatory. If you can't fit this right here, then put it at the end of your notes. All right, so moving along. All right, so remember, when we're reformatting a simple argument for sure, we never have a conclusion at the top. And in fact, even when we talk about something called complex arguments, when you're reformatting, never ever should I see a conclusion, okay? Remember, when you're reformatting, you need to keep all of the statements isolated. Each statement gets its own line, and you start with the premises. So the first premise is statement 3. Now, at this point, the numbering is going to change. Here, we're numbering statements. Here, we're numbering premises only. So we're going to do P1. So notice that statement 3, a premise, becomes P1, and then I want you to use colon marks. All right, then a space, so put a space here, and then we copy what is inside these brackets. Free will, so write real small because you need lots of room to write everything here. So free will refers to any action, choice. Okay, so check your writing. This needs to be justified. You should not bring the rest of the statement to under the label in the reformat. Why? Because if you do that, if you put words under the statement labels in the reformatted version, it's going to look like it's in a paragraph again. And the thing is, we don't want it to be in paragraph form. We want it to be in a list form. So formatting matters a lot when reformatting. There's all kinds of elements. So then this needs to be, you might have to, like when you're doing this online for grade, you might have to hit the space bar quite a bit. But for now, you can just control where your hand is relative to the end of your writing instrument. Choice or decision voluntarily made. Okay. All right. So notice how nice the formatting is. If your stuff is all down here, all up here, you need to change that and make it nice like this. Okay, so then what's next? Remember, so each statement in the argument gets its own line. In a simple argument, all the premises will come first and then the conclusion. So statement 4 will be labeled as what? P what? P2, colon mark, space, my wearing a mask is something I almost rewrote it and I didn't need to do that. I voluntarily choose to do. Okay. Again, notice how I didn't go under the label, making sure that this looks like a list and not a paragraph. And now I can do the conclusion. Conclusion, colon, see? Make sure that the labels are in a nice column. So I have P1 directly above P2. I have P2 directly above P3. So they shouldn't like taper off this way or taper off that way. Formatting matters through and through. So then we have, I am wearing a mask of my own free will. Okay, so we have presented the statements in a list-like format. We have labeled the premises with a P. We have renumbered any statements in the paragraph form according to which premise they are. So this is premise 1, S3 became P1, S4 became P2. So remember, when we're reformatting, we're numbering premises only, not the conclusion. Conclusions do not get numbered. Now I'm going to see if I should apply any uniform language. That's where you do this here. So free will refers to any action, choice, or decision voluntarily made. My wearing a mask is something I voluntarily choose to do. I am wearing a mask of my own free will. There's no instance where we need to employ uniform language. One thing I want to call your attention to is some students want to just say, they want to get rid of my. And they say wearing a mask is something I voluntarily choose to do. That would have been okay now that I'm thinking about it, but it's not necessary. Like I said, when in doubt, stick to the examples I've given you. Here, you couldn't get rid of I am. See, wearing a mask of my own free will, that would be a sentence fragment. So I just want to give you an example of what the mistakes sometimes students make. All right, so let's go ahead and take notes for page 4, or last page of notes. So as we saw, right, and I might not list this out exactly like you saw it in the Soft Talk module, but it'll be very close, and it's still going to capture all the relevant formatting principles and some other information. So one is you're going to present each logically. I think one reason why I'm writing big is because my lead point is getting dull and I need to make it sharp. Present each logically relevant statement in a list-like format. Each statement gets its own place in the list. I'm emphasizing this because some students will take a sentence that has two statements and put them in the same line or place of the list. Okay, what else did we do? We labeled the premises with a capital P and renumbered them. Okay, then we also labeled the conclusion. We're definitely going to add some stuff here when it comes to complex arguments, so make sure you're writing small and leave lots of room here. Labeled the conclusion, so this applies to, of course, simple arguments that have only one conclusion. Labeled, or I shouldn't say labeled, label the conclusion, and I'm going to put here in a simple argument, right, because they have only one conclusion, with, this means with, a capital C, not a little one. But no number is assigned. Okay, so we've got that. Remember also to start with any premises in the list, end with the conclusion. And of course, strictly speaking, we're still talking about a lot of this right here is for simple arguments. There'll be some special things we need to take note of that align with this, but there's still some special considerations we need to make when it comes to complex arguments, and we'll note that down here. But it generally applies to all kinds of arguments. This applies to simple and complex arguments, and something similar to this applies for complex arguments. So these are the reformatting conventions that you must use when reformatting an argument, and those reformatting conventions are fully reflected here. Another thing that you need to remember, let's do a text box. Also, employ basic writing mechanics and conventions. Start a statement with a capital letter, end a statement with a period. You can see that we did that, right? Capital letter, capital letter, capital letter. I say that because if you have two statements in one sentence, the second statement may not have a capital letter, and you'll need to capitalize it when you separate it out from that sentence and put it in a list-like format. And we will see an example of that.